Hello my friends, welcome to Jessie James Beads. I hope that you are having a beautiful day today. It has been miserable, cold and wet here in England, in the United Kingdom is what I was aiming for. So how has it been where you are? Give me a quick wave to let me know when you've tuned in and tell me if you can see and hear me okay. Whilst we're just gathering, I'd like to tell you a little bit about the Winter Goddess collection. Beautiful, beautiful bead collections, and the colours are amazing. Now I've popped links in the Facebook video for you to have a look at all of the different ways that you can look at these goddess bead mixes. So the first link shows you where you can get hold of the Goddess Artemis, which is what we'll be working with today. But you can also bundle and save a little bit of money by collecting all of the summer goddesses, or all of the winter goddesses, or all 10 of the goddess mixes, or any of the other ones you fancy having a look through at. So let's have a look. Hazel is in and Anne is in from a cold and wet California. I had one of your lovely state ladies come into my shop today, and she said it was very much swimming weather when she left, but that was a few weeks ago now. So how are you? Are you guys keeping well? Sabrina is in. Hello and welcome. Hazel, Anne and Sabrina, thank you so much for joining us today here on the Jessie James Beads Facebook channel. Hopefully we will be popping this video up to the blog and to YouTube later. So today's bead mix is Goddess Artemis. Now Goddess Artemis was the Greek goddess of the hunt. She's also associated with independence and freedom. Confidence, which is something that I always feel more confident when I'm wearing jewellery. So I've got two different Monstera leaf earrings in today because I feel just that confident that I can pull off completely asymmetric earrings. Goddess Artemis was also connotated with being the goddess of wild animals. Now I have a particular passion for animal welfare, so it's lovely for me to be able to work with the Goddess Artemis bead mix today. Now whether you're interested in looking at the history and mythology associated with these, or whether you just fancy an absolutely glorious collection of beads, all very carefully curated to work beautifully with one another, why don't I pop you down to the board and we'll have a quick look at the Goddess Artemis bead mix just while we're waiting for our fellow beady friends to join us. So we have a gorgeous, gorgeous collection. Anne says, love your beautiful angel necklace. Thank you so much. Anita is in. I am up and at it today, my darling. I had one of those pay it forward moments today in the shop where I work. A gentleman came in sporting a coffee and said, did I mind if I carried it round with him? And I said, no, don't spill it. And he went and bought me a coffee out of the goodness of his heart. Never met him before. How wonderful is that? So paying it forwards, I've sent some beads to a friend in Slovenia today. If someone is kind to you, I always like to share that energy and be kind further onwards and spread it all around the world. Roberta is in. Good morning to you, darling. So we're looking at goddess number 5 as we've got it noted just here. That's for me to look at. It's Artemis, the goddess Artemis, Greek goddess of the hunt. So you do have these absolutely fabulous, I like to think of them as tassels. Technically it's a tassel, but it's a gorgeous fabric flower design with a bead cap up at the top holding everything together. So you've got golden tones in this beautiful bead mix. You have got ivory. We've got what I can only imagine is the most gorgeous rose quartz. It certainly feels and looks like rose quartz to me. How have your respective days been, my loves? I hope that the day is being kind to you, no matter what time it is. Is it 10 AM on the West Coast? 1 PM on the East Coast? Or have I completely missed it again? Not very good with time zones, honestly. We've got some gorgeous, I want to say metallic, almost like a red gold, but not quite. And these are half coated, so you get a different effect on the far side of those hexagons. We've also got crystal cage beads, which are always lots and lots of fun to work with. We have got some fancy boho beads as well. You've got this ivory boho, and then you've got sort of a coffee tone and I don't even know. Vanilla cream, I suppose. 10 a.m. in California. I got something right, go me. You've also got these magnificent, very, very weighty bead caps. Absolutely gorgeous. I imagine these are, again, fauna and flora inspired pieces. How about this little baby? This is gorgeous, and I love the intelligent connection point that you have here. A really beautiful pendant piece, I would say, or possibly a charm. Hello from beautiful Islamadora in Florida. If I have, oh no, I've missed out some Islamorada. Do you know what? I'm going to apologise profusely for not getting that quite right. It's just gone midday in Kentucky. Welcome to you, no matter where you've come from, whether or not I can pronounce it. You've got spangly extra size beads. These are absolutely wonderful to use in macrame, if you fancy having a go at that. We have also got wooden beads. Now, I adore wooden beads. I adore all things natural, but these are fantastic. Goddess of the Hunt, also connotated in some spheres with the woods as well. So to have wood in there, it's absolutely beautiful. I got it right in the end, Stacey. Thank you, darling. I think you're being generous. I appreciate that. We've also got, I'm going to do these ones next, very, very funky shaped glass beads. These are fantastic. They make you think about how you can set them, perhaps. Looks a little bit like angel wings to me. And you've also got metallic spacers in a leaf design. You've got these fantastic half coated again, but these are drops like a briolette or a briolet if you prefer. Last but not least, some of my favourite beads from this collection are these gunmetal colour. Again, very large hole beads. Fantastic. Hello, Jem from Moodus, Connecticut. If I have not said that correctly, please forgive me. A lot of different pronunciations. So I'm going to pop these beads back into my little dish. I hope that that noise isn't too jarring as I pop them in the dish. I really like the noise that beads make when you move them around. But what I want you to see when these are all piled up is how gorgeously each and every one of those beads tones with each and every other bead. These rose quartz connectors, 2-hole connectors, are a little bit more vibrant in reality than on your screen. So what I have chosen to use from this collection, which is Goddess Artemis, I didn't show you these because I've already used one, and we're going to use one in today's design. So you've got the fabulous, fabulous arrow bead. I love these just by themselves, and if all you wanted to do was to put that onto an earring finding, I think you've got ready-made beautiful jewellery. But in addition to that, we have got a very interesting bead. Now this is a step cut cube, which may or may not be something that you've seen before. But the thing that's interesting about this is the drill aperture. So rather than going through from one flat face to another flat face, like you would imagine a die bead to be strung, these are corner to corner, which I think gives you a completely different dynamic, and that's how we're going to be using one of those today. Tu Tao is in from, I'm going to say Texas, and maybe I'll get it right. And we will have to discuss my projects at another time, my darling. I'm here with Jessie James Beads today, so drop me a message later. Now, I imagine that this is potentially a rose quartz, but it could also be a man-made. I don't have the details on that, but you do get 2 in the bead mix, and again it's got a very generous drill aperture up the middle. Makes me think it might be a man-made, but I'm almost certain that this is rose quartz in that double connector just there. Texas, yay, I got one right, well done me. Diane is in and says, hi Jem, the video keeps breaking up on my end. I'm so sorry, unfortunately Facebook and the internet being what they are, we aren't able to control what happens with the broadcast. If it troubles you, do catch up with us on the replay when hopefully it will play a little bit more smoothly for you. Susan's in from Arkansas where it's 58 degrees. That sounds chilly. That sounds chilly. Here in England today it's been about 6 degrees Celsius. I don't know how that relates to Fahrenheit. Anyway, we will move on We're going to make an earring today using these components that I've showed you from the beautiful Goddess Artemis mix, and we're going to make a long drop earring. So let's have a look at the project. Now you can create a small part or the total part. It's a long drop earring, Goddess of the Hunt earrings. So you could choose to just have the top section or just the coiled section, or you could even just hang your lovely arrow directly on an earring finding. I've just found a random pair of earring findings hanging around on my desk, so those are the ones that we're going to be using today. You may or may not have watched me before, and if you have, you'll know I like mixing metal colours. So I've got one of my earrings pre-prepared in a gold colour wire. And the wire we're working with today is 18 gauge round. So your German style or medium temper wire is ideal for this project. There are two main compartments or components rather that we're going to make. Anne is my weather helper. Anne is telling me that 58 is 14 degrees. That's actually bliss. That would be lovely. At 14 degrees, I can wear a very light jacket if I wear a jacket at all. It's been 6 degrees here, so that's waterproof coat and gloves. So this is what we're going to create together today. You don't have to have as long a drop as I've created. Actually, I'm just going to pop you back up to the other camera for just a second. I want to give you an idea of how long this completed necklace is. Sorry. So I have quite a short neck. A little bit stumpy. I don't let it worry me. So it's quite a long earring. It doesn't quite reach my shoulder. There's a little bit of false perspective there. It's a long drop, so you can create half, or you could even do the top half on one ear and the bottom half on the other ear, and still use both of those beautiful arrows to draw the look together. I'm rocking asymmetry today. These are all Jessie James Bead's Monstera leaf designs over the past year or so. Let's head back down to the board and make some jewellery together. Sassy Sissy's in. We'll have to watch on replay. Have a great night all. Stay warm. It's raining and bitterly cold. This is a couple of hours north of me in England. So yeah, I'm not surprised it's raining. That's the piece we're going to make today. And I'm going to show you how to create this first section using this fabulously drilled cube with step facets. So normally you would expect the drill aperture to go through the bead like so. Today it's going diagonally, but not just diagonally flat side to flat side, it's going diagonally corner to corner, which I think is spectacular. We're going to start with approximately a 3.5 to 4 inch length of wire. This is 18 gauge round wire. And we'll begin by warming that through to get the wire pliable and smooth. Let's give that a really nice straighten while we're at it. Now when you're making any kind of jewellery utilising wire, it really does pay to make sure that your ends are cut with the flush side of your cutters. Let's give that a quick trim, like so. And then you won't have any naughty sticky uppy bits ending up in your design. We really don't want that to happen. So I'm going to be borrowing my flat pliers, which I acquired recently at the Jessie James Beads. I'm going to call it Winter Camp, and Sarah can tell me off later. Sherry says, love your necklace. Thank you so very much. Come Sunday, that's going to be a tutorial on my YouTube channel. So what we're going to do is use our flat facing pliers. Now, if you don't have any of these fab flat pliers that are the same distance all the way across, you can use any other flat facing pliers. We're just going to be making some nice angular bends. So I'm going to estimate the size of the shape that I want to create, and the shape that we're creating is this diamond or square set on the diagonal. Whichever way you want to think of it, we're making a square shape, and then we're going to use that as if it's a simple loop. So let's just get that to sit down neatly. So I'm going to estimate the size of the square that I want to make. And what I've done is I've taken that angle a little bit further than I need it to go, because when I bring that back up to square at 90 degrees, I get a reasonably good square angle on it. So you don't have to have the same size square on both sides of the bead, but what it pays to do is to try and get each side of the square the same distance. So the smart money would be on using a ruler or making a mark on a bit of paper and just repeating that distance. I'm going to eyeball it and see what it looks like. So I can immediately see that's just a little bit larger. Now if that happens to you, what you can do is move that distance along a little bit by opening that angle ever so slightly out again, and then just moving along like so. You can make it ever so slightly smaller. Another way you can do this, I'm just going to switch to my bent chain nose pliers because I can hold them underneath and still show you what I want to achieve by the nature of the fact they've got a bend on the end. So you can just very, very gently move that angle along a bit. So we've shrunk that size down. If you're using a measurement on a piece of paper, you won't suffer that issue at all. I just wanted to show off my new pliers. Do love a good set of pliers. So again, I'm just going to switch over to my bent chain nose pliers because I can hold them underneath and I can move that wire where I need it to go. So again, what you may notice is that this angle is slightly softer than the preceding two angles I've created. So to fix that, I'm just going to draw that wire over the top of the square shape we're making and then pull it back out again, and you'll see that we've made a much stronger angle in that corner of the wire. So we're just making a simple loop with an angle of wire coming away. Now the angle will need to be at 45 degrees, so if I pull that away straight and then give that a lovely squish. Now what I'm doing here is work hardening the loop I've created. Now whether you're making a loop that's round or oval or weird, diamond shape like this one, having it with a little extra strength is really important. So I've given that a little bit of work hardening, which means that when I open this up to attach it to things, it should close back down really neatly to its original position. So I'm just going to very carefully strengthen. And the reason I'm able to press down here is that there's no wires crossing over. Everything is in it's as if it's between two panes of glass, so it's in 2 dimensions only. Just giving that a quick squish to make it nice and strong, and then we're going to pop on that lovely coloured, diagonally drilled, beautiful cube bead. So I'm just going to repeat exactly what I did on the one end on the other end, but what I need to be mindful of when I make that first bend is that I'm not going to be harming the bead in any way. So if you leave yourself a tiny bit of space before you turn that wire away, again at 45 degrees, you'll make sure that you don't cause any damage to the corner of the bead. Any bead deserves to be treated with respect. Metal beads can have a little bit more action, whereas glass and gemstone beads just need slightly more gentle treatment. So again, you can use your flat pliers, you can use your chain nose tapered pliers, or you could use your bent chain nose pliers as I am. Now you don't have to match the size of the diamond shape that you make on the other end. So you could have one very large and then you could go for one a little bit smaller. The point is I'm trying to keep it square. So each of these little lengths of wire need to be of a similar shape. But if you push that wire past the angle, draw it back, you'll get a much stronger shape. So again, I'm drawing the wire past where I want it to finish up and then pulling it back. So I'm just going to give that a very quick little, just a squish on the V shape at the end before I pop in with my flush cutters and trim away at the point where it crosses over the angle that leaves the bead. So we made the first angle when we came out of the bead, that's where I want my wire to end up. So if I just push that down by hand a second, you'll see that it returns to its start point. Once you're happy with those angles, and again you can tighten them up a little bit if you need to, make them slightly stronger, just wiggle that around until you're happy with how it looks. Once you're happy, we're going to very, very strongly squish across. How do you know when you've work hardened the wire enough? As long as you're putting a reasonable amount of pressure with your pliers, and if you struggle with that, one of the tricks that you can use is to pop your pliers down one handle on the board, put your frame into the space between those two plates, and you can press down like this. You can achieve a little bit more strength than perhaps if you struggle with wrist issues. So one thing I would say is I'm protecting my bead here. Can you see I've popped my nails over the bead so that if my hand slips and I twist, I don't smash my bead, because beads are important. When you have got a little bit more rigidity, let me grab a piece of scrap wire a second. If I hold some wire that hasn't been used This is a little bit firm because I've just used it, but when you press down it's really easy. Let's just make that into a circular shape a second. So let's just say this is the world's worst simple loop. If I press down, it very, very easily deforms. But once you've added a little bit of work hardening, as we have done here, it's much more rigid and it simply won't budge in the same way. You don't need to press it very, very much, but can you see here, if I just hold this really firmly, can you hear that noise? That's the wire saying, actually, I'm not going to move. And that's when you know you've work hardened it enough. Now, because we're making earrings, earrings don't have the same stresses as a bracelet or a necklace have. So a simple loop, which is what we've created in essence, is perfectly adequate. If you want to do a wrapped loop, you'll need a little extra space either side of the bead and a tail of wire to wrap around the core. Now, it is possible to create these diamond-shaped loops. They're basically loops, and still have a wrapping, but what you can find is that when you start wrapping, you lose that last section of wire before the tail wraps around, and in that way you don't end up with the shape that you actually wanted. So I can see here that actually I'd quite like that to be slightly firmer angle-wise, so I'm just going to move that slightly, and now I'm a little bit happier. So I've got one section of my earring design ready. As I mentioned a little bit earlier on, if you don't want a great big long earring, on one side you could have an earring set up like this. So you've got your diamond shape simple loops. Into one side you'd add the earring finding, and into the other side you'd add your little arrow. However, I want us to have another option in terms of techniques that we're going to learn today, and you can mix and match as you please. So I'm using the same wire again. To tell you are very, very welcome, my lovely. Always ask if you have any questions. If I know the answer, I will always try to help. Can't guarantee I'll know the answer. So I have now around about 6 or 7 inches. Again, this is 18 gauge wire, and it's a standard round wire in a medium or German style. So I'm going to give that a lovely warm through, and that really is quite important. And what we're going to do is to commence at one end. Again, I would say ensure that you flush cut. That's a flush cut end I can see already. That end is not flush cut. So we're most likely to trim some off anyway, but just in case we don't, or we run right down to the wire, so to speak, you might like to just ensure that that is nice and flush. You're also much less likely to scar your hands. If you accidentally draw a flush cut piece of wire over your hand, it's much less likely to injure you than a piece that's cut with the other side of your flush or semi-flush cutters. So it's just a good practice to get into. You end up with slightly less hand damage. So let's give this a warm through again, just to make sure it's ready to work. What we're going to do is a standard spiral, but slightly different. So if you spiraled with me before, you'll know the key to getting that circular form in the centre is to start with your round nose pliers, but don't complete your circle. Go most of the way around your circle, and then you can just gently open that up over the top, and as you just push that closed into position, it's likely to be a little bit more rounded. Sometimes they can be a little bit on the squishy side, or they can be more oval. So what I want to do this time, instead of doing a closed up spiral, and by a closed up spiral I mean we keep the wire rotating around in an ever increasing disc where the wire touches all the way around, what we're going to do is to create a slightly opened out spiral. So I'm going to give that central circular form a really good squish. And I don't want to change the shape, I don't want to change the profile of the wire, but giving it a really good squish means that when I start to rotate around, and I'm going to leave a gap. So I've done one pass of wire. Now instead of pushing this wire against the preceding circuit of wire, we're going to leave a little bit of a gap. The slower you move with your spirals, the neater and tidier and better controlled your spirals will be. So even if you see somebody on the internet and they just whiz around very, very quickly, don't fret, you just take your time. So I'm going to do a couple of rotations of the wire, and this again was around about 6 or 7 inches. I'm going to take that around, I think probably one more time. Now if you end up, let's just make that too tight. So if you end up with a pass of wire too close to the preceding wrap, you can very simply open that out, like so, until you get that same uniform gap. And conversely, if you make it too wide or you go slightly awry, you can usually fix that. Just bring it back, give your wire a little bit of warmth, and then you can continue to push, keeping everything in 2 dimensions until you get the size of spiral that you want. So once we have rotated an open spiral, and my start point is just here, so you go all the way around once, all the way around twice, all the way around a 3rd time. And what I'd quite like to do before I go any further is give that a nice little squish. Now, marking this with your tools, don't worry about it, because we're really going to do something quite unusual to this in a moment. And it's something that I encourage you to practice with, so that you get to start understanding what you can do with wire and what you can't do with wire. So before we go any further, I'm going to decide whether or not that's similar enough. Now I'm going for asymmetry, so I'm not overly worried, but if you're making earrings, you might need to take that just a little bit further or a little bit further back. What we're going to do is to pull that wire away at a right angle up at the top, as if you're making a lollipop, like so. So we've got our design so far, and before we go any further, I want to add my arrow on. We're going to add the arrow on at the straight end, allow that to slide all the way down to the bottom. That's where we're going to have it hanging at the end of the design. So you can just pop that on before you forget about it and add a bead and then think, oh dear, I didn't do everything that I needed to do. What I want to show you today is how you can put texture on wire without using a hammer and block. So can you see on this golden piece, can you see those striations, those little stripes? Now if you buy jewellery or you are a passionate person who's bought jewellery since the 1980s, a lot of gold jewellery during the 70s and 80s was diamond cut. And you'd have these little angles and notches cut into the surface of your gold to add scintillation. So you'd have these little shards of light dancing, and it could look like you've set diamonds into your jewellery. That was the idea anyway. So let's pop that one back down. I want to show you how you can use round nose pliers to give a faux diamond cut effect to your wire. Now, if you practice this on scrap wire first, where did that scrap wire go from earlier? Here it is. Let me just grab that out of the scrap pot. It's really important that you understand what you can do with wire and what you can't do with wire. And what we're going to do is faux diamond cutting. So if I put my round nose pliers, and I would never normally use round nose pliers across wire. I put it on the end and use it to make spirals or to make circles or loops, but I would never put it across the wire. I see lots of people teaching, let me just grab a bit that I don't need to use, and they're using round nose pliers to create bends. You lose control if you do that, because you're never quite sure where that bend's going to occur. If you want to make a bend in your wire, use a fine point flat plier and you'll completely control it. However, something that you can do with round nose pliers is create this faux diamond cutting. So grab yourself a piece of scrap wire, give it a little bit of a warm. If it's seen some action, it might be a bit tense. And what we're going to do is press really firmly across the wire. Can you see we've already made a little divot? And again, if you take your time, what I'm hoping will happen is that I will snap this scrap wire. Because what I want to happen is to show you tolerances in copper. Now, I've pressed incredibly hard on this wire and it's actually reacted really well. Sometimes you just want something to break. But what can happen, which is why I suggest using scrap wire first, is that you can just go too hard and the whole thing snaps. I'm going to break it now just because you need to see what happens. So if you press too hard, you can create a stress fracture across your wire. We don't want a stress fracture. We actually want a little bit of a soft touch. So what we're going to do on that spiral that we've created, keeping your arrow at the south side of the spiral, it will end up looking like this. So that's the south side. We're going to start near the section of spiral which is accessible. So very, very softly to begin with, we're going to press down on that spiral at whatever interval you like. If it's too far apart, it just looks like tool marks. If it's too close together, you can't really see what's going on. So practice with your scrap wire. Once you get past that 6 o'clock position, you can scooch that arrow all the way round and continue round the remainder of the spiral. So practicing on your scrap wire is really important because it means that you don't ruin a spiral that you really like. When you create this faux diamond cutting on your wire, as long as you don't press too hard, you're actually adding a bit of toughness to that spiral. So although we only really work hard in the centre, adding that faux diamond cutting has given it a bit of rigidity. So let's just add in now our bead. Slide that down into position at the top of the spiral. You might need to play around with the angle slightly, and then we're just going to go for a simple loop up at the top. So for this one, I've gone for a simple loop in the same orientation as the spiral. So I'm just going to draw that wire over to the side, pop my round nose pliers in, draw the wire over so that it comes back and meets the wire, the core wire that's coming out of that bead. It's not a particularly round one, never mind. And then we're going to trim away using the flush cutters, semi-flush cutters if you prefer, before we then close that loop up. And at this point, if you need to, you can just make it a little bit rounder if you want to. What I'm going to do is ensure, can you see there's a bit of a tiny gap just here? I'm going to close that loop up, so you might need to just play with it until that loop is closed. And then we're going to give it a really hearty squish with flat pliers. So squishy, squishy. And then again, you could have one earring with the arrow on the bottom of the through diagonal drilled cube bead, and then the other with the spiral with that faux diamond cutting. Or you could do what I'm going to do, which is link the whole lot together. Just need to make sure that my loop, albeit a diamond shaped loop, closes up fully. Give it a squish to make sure it's nice and strong, and you can open whichever loop you want to join that up together. Give it a squish when it's in position, making sure you're kind to your beads, and then grab hold of your preferred earring finding. Somebody asked me a couple of weeks ago what to do when this happens. When the ball on your ball and spring earring finding slides down into the loop, normally you can just scooch it back up. So just give that a quick scooch, and then we'll pop the top of our earring in, close the earring finding back up, and you have got, mine are asymmetrically coloured today. So I've done one with gold and one with copper. They're slightly different sizes because I wanted to show you that it doesn't really matter if your diamond shaped loops are different sizes. And again, I'm just going to swap you over to the other camera and show you what they look like as a full length earring. So if I go that way, is probably the brightest lit. It's not quite down to the shoulder, it's just false perspective that makes it look like it is, but I think they're really, really pretty earrings. So that's Goddess Artemis. We've worked in with some 18 gauge round wire, German style or medium temper. I'm going to go and have a cup of peppermint tea. I hope that you've enjoyed the class today here at Jessie James Beads. Goddess Artemis is the mix we've used today. Absolutely loving the colours in this one. Works really well with both gold and copper, but you could add in your silver as well. There's lots of silver metallic components in this bead mix. I look forward to seeing you. I will be back next week on December the 14th, same time, so that's 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. on the Californian coast. I don't know what the time zone's actually called. Who can say? I hope that you have the most wonderful day. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. My name is Jem Hawkes. I look forward to seeing you again very soon. Bye for now. Love from everybody at Jessie James.